All right. So, Antonio, I just hit record. So we're live. Thank you so much for taking the call.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, when I think back to how you and I met, we met through a mutual friend, fellow comedian Chris Harvey, and
Yes.
I've had him on the podcast twice. So I felt like it was only proper to also get you on if you were so willing to do so. So thanks so much.
Right on. Yeah. Chris is a great guy. We've had some really fun, a lot of laughs hanging out with Chris. He's a funny dude.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to kind of kick it off. You're a comedian. I would love to hear from you how you got started, what made you want to get on stage.
Oh, how I got started doing stand up?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I was in college and I definitely have always been an introvert. I've never been really good at making friends. I would be, I mean, if someone, anytime I had a lot of friends, it was because someone was like, "Hey, you all need to meet this guy. He's cool." And then you kind of just sort of like, you have those friends. So anyways, in college, I was kind of kept to myself, and the only time I would find myself really talking would be in lecture, in or in discussion sessions in class. And for whatever reason, I just think of things that would make everybody laugh, whether it would be in the lecture hall, whether or it would be in discussion. And so I kind of started to think that maybe I had some type of talent at that because I mean some of those lecture halls it's like 300 people and and you say one word and then everyone's laughing and it's kind of it makes you feel like well maybe there's something into this. I never knew that you could just do stand up. Like I didn't know that you could just like start doing it and be a comedian. I had no idea. I was 24 at the time, and it never even crossed my mind as that was a possibility. I grew up in Wisconsin, Green Bay, Wisconsin, pretty small town. Not a lot of uh, you know artists, performing artists in my community. So I actually started listening to podcasts when I would go to class in between, and then I was actually listening to the Joe Rogan Experience back in like 2010. So it was like, I mean, it's a really big show now, but back then it was, not as big. But I was really starting to get interested in the stuff that he was talking about with psychedelics. I was myself growing mushrooms in my apartment, and like, so I was kind of in on because of that. I was kind of interested in the show. But then he started talking about stand up. I didn't even really put the two together. I didn't really know he was even in stand up until he started talking about it. And you'd have a bunch of guests on and they talk about stand up. And after, a few months of listening to it, I just kind of wanted to, I guess, try it because I felt like, okay, I'm funny in class and I'm really interested in this show and they're always talking about comedy, so, I might as well uh try it out. So I went to an open mic at the comedy club on State Street in Madison, which it's very unique open mic. I learned, back then it was the only open mic I'd ever even seen. But I mean, it was a sold out showroom. Probably about 200 plus college age kids in there. They charged $2 tickets, and it was like $2 PBRs. So people would all go there to kind of party on a Wednesday night. But then also they had an open mic for stand up going on inside the showroom. And so I went and I watched 1 week just uh just to watch. And you know I, I don't know if you might relate to this experience, but did you, when you went to your first open mic, did you kind of watch it and think, well, wow, some of these guys are even less funny than I am? Do you ever feel like that?
Well, for me it was weird because I had went to like it was a deal that I had with a friend of mine who looks exactly like me. It's really creepy how similar he like the way we look. We're the same height, same skin color. He's a little bit more chubbier than me, and I'm glad it's not the reverse way around. But he's way funnier than me. And my group of friends, we wanted to get him on stage, and we kept telling him he should do do stand-up comedy. And I told him, I said, dude, if you go on stage, I'll go on stage. And I had moved up here to Akron. I'm originally from Youngstown, which is between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And I moved up to Akron, and he sent me the Funny Stop, where you and I officially met. And we went to the club, and that was the first time I went to a comedy club. I had not seen any live comedy before that. And we walk in the door, and Pete spit on our face because he was yelling at us because we didn't call in to sign up for the open mic. And he told us that we had to do 5 clean minutes, and my buddy didn't have clean material, but I did. Because I didn't know what it was going to be like. I knew I was bringing my wife to the show, so I didn't want to get too raunchy or whatnot. And I had clean material, and it was like a dead night. There was probably like 5 people in the audience, and most of them were comedians. And I went up there, and I've been going up ever since. So that was like February of last year.
Okay, so you had a okay, so getting back to so you didn't have then that experience of going to an open mic and being like, wow, these people are, not the greatest, so maybe I should try it. So trying to get back, I was gonna say the first time okay, that week I went just to watch, and then the next week I went back, and it was, you get a 3-minute set in front of 200 people. I had on like I was wearing gym shorts and a sweater. I just like walked out of I was just home, and I was just like, oh crap, I need to go to the mic. I didn't put a thought into the way I looked. That I got on stage, and 3 minutes. I had one joke that got an applause break, and my friend was filming it, and you can kind of see in my eyes, like, okay, like that's when I got hooked, because I mean the whole place blows up and they're clapping, and then I'm just, okay, that's kind of when I would say the obsession slash addiction slash soul sucking life decision happened. Because I've been doing comedy 8 years now. I just moved to New York a couple months ago, but I was just full time road comedy for about 4 years straight. That's I just basically my only priority was stand up, and making paying my responsibilities that I have to. I'm a 32-year-old now, but yeah, it was just basically being able to fund my life with stand up. So it's the new adventure now, because New York's more about making a name for yourself in the city than it is to start out making any type of money.
So you're originally from Wisconsin. Did you go to the University of Wisconsin?
Right. Yeah. That was so. The comedy club on State Street, it's in Madison, Wisconsin, which is also where the university is. So
Nice.
so I was going to college there, and then that's where the club was. So that's why I ended up doing my first open mic.
That makes me think. I mean, like I said, I kind of went to go help my buddy out and get him on stage, and I wanted to try it out. And I had been a Joe Rogan fan for probably 4 or 5 years, listening to his podcast. So I kind of felt like
Yeah.
I felt like that was training, like education for me leading up to it. But I think, like, when I could think back to my first book report, I think I was like in the 3rd or 4th grade, and I had forgot that we had a book report due. And
Hmm.
the teacher said that we could either turn in a paper, or we could give a presentation on the book that would stand in for the paper. So I didn't write anything, so obviously all I could do was do the presentation.
Hmm.
And I went up in front of the class. This is the first time I did any, like, quote unquote public speaking, and I just opened up the book, and I looked at the title of each chapter, and I started telling jokes about each chapter. And the class they were dying, they were rolling, they were laughing so hard. And I ended up getting an A on that book report that I never wrote.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember having a very similar experience. A lot of the time, I wouldn't read the homework, and then you get called on, and you kind of had to BS your way through the answer. And I just was really good at. I mean, full disclosure, I cheated a lot through high school, through college. I did a lot of, you find tests online, people sharing the exams. I mean, I always kind of was I guess I got a skill in kind of BSing my way through life and humoring my way through relationships with friends. Like if I was funny, then they like me. Girlfriends, if I was funny, they'd like me. I actually like was doing that my whole life. I didn't know I was, it wasn't conscious. It was just like my defense mechanism.
Mm.
But that's kind of how I ever got attention. I'm an only child. So it's like from my dad, I would always try to make him laugh. It was kind of my validation, procedure, I guess, to go through to try to win. So I would do it with my teachers and employers. And, it was always like, yeah, he's not the best employee, but everyone likes having him around because he's funny. And I didn't even realize what I was doing until, probably a few years, ago. Now looking back on my life that I always, sometimes when I'm on stage and I'm just riffing, I feel like, oh, I'm just doing what I've always done, to kind of, make up for, my, insecurity and anxiety that I always feel, you know?
So you go up and you do this open mic and you're wearing gym shorts. You don't really care about how you look like. I would imagine you didn't spend hours and hours writing jokes.
No, I did.
Oh, you did?
I mean, I don't know about hours and hours, but I did have, about 4 or 5 jokes that that I had written out. And, I mean, one of them is I still throw in, and it was from my first set. I
Really?
still, I guess, yeah, I still throw it in because it's just, it's just, it's very true to, I don't know, um, some jokes are just, they're, so I mean, now I've been doing it for 8 years. I'll go on stage and I won't decide my set until I feel the vibe of the room. I
Mm-hmm.
see the people in the room, and I kind of I I've learned to kind of read what they want out of a stand up. And so, there's sometimes that particular joke will will fit into a set maybe that I do, tomorrow. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Or I might not do it for months, but it's just, you got hours of material eventually after you do it, for years, and you just kind of know when to tell particular jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's yeah, that particular joke I didn't necessarily know it was the best joke in that set. Because you don't necessarily know until you do the jokes. But
Mm-hmm.
I definitely thought I definitely prepared for it because
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that a lot of the comics that went up, their biggest problem for a lot of them was they didn't prepare anything, and they spend half of their time complaining that they only have 3 minutes, and basically making excuses for themselves on stage. Because I
Mm.
mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of college students that just, like you said, my buddy's making me do this, but instead of 5 people, like maybe they had the funny stop, they're doing it in front of 200, and so they're bombing like royally for the first time. It's pretty. I think it's a good way to get people to not to not keep doing it if they're not gonna take it seriously, which I think is really important. I think that way too many comics don't take it seriously, and they waste people's time. They make people think stand up isn't good. People stop going to shows, or there's a lot of that. That's I think a big problem in comedy.
That's unfortunate. When you were talking about how you read the room and you kind of adjust to what they're looking for, it makes me think of, have you heard of um, Kevin Downey Jr.?
No,
So
Robert Downey Jr.
yeah, for sure. Kevin is a comedian. He's actually originally from Michigan, but he's out of New York now. I think he moved to New York in like 91. But he was just featuring at the Funny Stop, and I was a host for him. And he did some time on America's Got Talent. If you have some free time to check out some of his clips, he's hilarious. But one of the things that he was talking to his his feature act was like energy levels in the room, and basically what he said was, uh, you want to read the energy of the room and just go a notch above their energy. He said you don't want to go too much above and you don't want to go too much below. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that different. But I mean, I don't think that anyone should uh, give other comics tell other comics what to and what not to do. I think that you can say this works for me, and this is how I approach comedy, and then
Oh, I just want to
I
be
think that
I just want to be clear that he wasn't telling me to do that. He was saying that that's one of the things that he's recognized. So he wasn't telling me to do anything. He wasn't giving advice. I was probing him on how he does his set. So I just want to make that clear.
okay. Well, right, and then I guess I was just clarifying my philosophy is that it is very I think that a lot of times people have a singular view of how stand up is performed, and me, for example, I don't necessarily always love uh, being brought up with a lot of energy, which I know is a lot of comedy clubs. That's how they kind of teach you to host. They say, everyone make all the noise in the world, get crazy, go nuts. Everyone's like, screaming at the top of their lungs. I'm a very low energy comic. I go up and I sit in the pocket. I tell jokes and I don't scream, I don't dance, I don't hump the stool, I don't act out any of my material. I don't, so if someone would go up with a lot of energy and then I would have to, I immediately would make fun of the fact that everyone, I would just be like, why are you guys yelling? Like, you know, what are you guys expecting? Like, it's not a football game, but certain clubs that would be, you know, you have to know how to convey your real feelings. Because I mean, I could pretend that I'm a high energy comic and stuff, but it'd be such BS I mean, I'm all about kind of addressing the real moments,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'll say how I'm feeling if I get brought up in a way that's like, a lot of times they'll say, they'll get your name wrong, they'll get where you're from wrong, they'll get your credits wrong, and you know, if someone says my name wrong, a lot of times I won't even correct it because who cares? People won't even remember your name half the time, more than half the time anyways. So if you start off with, actually, it's pronounced Aguilar, your first impression is you take yourself too seriously, and
Yeah.
um, but if they mess it up in a way that makes me laugh, like I remember one time I was brought up as Angel Aguilar, right? And I mean, I get Anthony, I can get mixing up, but I mean, it's the first time that someone has confused Antonio with Angel, right? So, so I was just like, it's Antonio or Angel. I guess is it. Some people, a lot of people, they call me Angel for no reason at all. It's just kind of like, it, it was just in the moment because I felt uncomfortable by it because it was like almost felt like it was on purpose.
Really?
I mean, well, I mean, you do thousands of shows. Sometimes you can even read the vibe of the person bringing you on stage,
Mm.
and there's these things that a lot of times, usually it's like an open mic host, and what they'll do is they'll bring you up they'll kind of in an as a question they'll say your name. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
so they'll be like, Lewis Lee.
Mm-hmm.
So then
Yeah.
they have to go up like it's like the host isn't even sure that you should even. It sounds almost like they're not even sure you should even be the comic. So it's kind so it's like then the crowd, if it's actual crowd, usually it's his friends, and so he's kind of like, we don't know who this person is, do we? No, we don't. And it's kind of like they're giving off that vibe, or the crowd will
Mm.
be kind of just like confused, like, well, is it Lewis Lee or isn't it Lewis Lee? You're the host. You have the names.
Yeah.
Say the name. And
Yeah.
pretend like you give a crap about your next comic. So sometimes um, when a host brings up your name as a question, they have it in front of you, and they're not even trying to pronounce it right, or they're not even saying the right name. Uh, One time I had a host bring me up as Antonio, and then and some Mexican bullshit is what she said for my last name, right? So your next comic is Antonio, some Mexican bullshit. Anyways, here you go, right? And so I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced that type of attitude from a host, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's kind of like they want to bring you down a peg instead of making you feel welcome.
Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
know. I don't know. It does happen sometimes, and a lot of times it's in like a depressing city where it's like, okay, this person's hosting shows here for 10 years. I'd be a I'd be an asshole myself if I was sticking around. I mean, I don't want to say any town in particular, but
Yeah. No,
let's
I get
pick
it.
on let's pick on like Sioux Falls, North Dakota. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, for
Yeah, I
sure.
mean,
That's
well,
funny.
I'm mad because I am married and can't leave, and I have kids that I don't treat well, and so I'm gonna take it out on comics because I have this power somehow.
Yeah, that's weird. That's strange. And one of the things that like
It's very common.
when
Very
you,
common. You'll be surprised. I mean, I've been all over the country, and it's actually a very common thing that you'll see. The local kind of gatekeepers, or the people who have the power in these small markets, they a lot of time they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, which I totally understand.
yeah. And one of the things that you were saying, when giving your rationale about like energy levels and what have you,
Yeah.
when I think back to like the way you were breaking it down, I really think back to like being authentic, being
Mhm.
authentically who you are on stage,
Mhm.
and staying true to that because the audience can read that. And
Yes.
one of the things you had also said was that it's kind of like assumed that when you're a host, the club wants you to bring a lot of energy or whatnot.
Oh yeah.
And
They almost always do.
so with someone like you, and I've seen your material, and you're hilarious. You have great writing. You have great stage presence. I've seen you do crowd work before, just a little bit of it, as much as 5 minutes, which you can do. But
Right. Thank you.
so, but I can see that you do stick in the pocket, and you have a certain like level of energy that's consistent, and it's a
Mhm.
level of energy that a lot of people wouldn't like assume that you would want to bring that when you're hosting. So like
Right.
so people like you, I have a couple friends that are like you, with their energy levels, but they're super funny. So how does that work? Like with someone with your low energy, can you like break it down from a hosting perspective, how you see things?
It's a great question. So you do have to start off a lot of the time as a host, and so when you are it can be kind of tricky if you are not a high energy comic, and the manager's telling you like, make them go nuts, you know. Uh, and so at my home club, what I would do is I would just do my act, um, as I would go up as the host, do my act, and then when I was done, I would be like, all right, now everyone get great. Like I would basically turn into a completely different person,
Mm-hmm.
and make it, because that's what they asked me to do. You know,
Gotcha.
so I would then turn off being Antonio the comedian, and become Antonio the host.
Mm-hmm.
And I will definitely say I don't think I will ever be that good at that aspect of hosting. It doesn't come naturally to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'll say that I'm very happy that um, I I don't have to host that much anymore. Some clubs now, if you want to break in, you do have to host, and it has been an obstacle for me, because sometimes they don't want you to do your material even. Like they want to judge you as a comic, but they want you to go up and host the show, which is it is a different muscle.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a huge skill if you have in your repertoire to can get your foot in the door in a lot of clubs, and but if it's not your forte,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you need to worry about it that much. If
Mm-hmm.
as long as you are consistently funny, and you can get your foot in the door in other ways
Mm-hmm.
than impressing as the host of the show.
Nice. And when you were explaining that it's kind of like you go into your act and then you kind of shift gears
Hmm.
and kind of provide what the club runner is looking for.
Right.
It makes me think too again how you talked about earlier, how you're looking at the audience, seeing what they need, and kind of just everything has context. Everything that you're doing
Right.
has a reason, and I feel like that's one of the biggest things that I've learned as an amateur comedian is this idea of like one of the things I always talk about is like I never run jokes past people. Like I never run jokes past my wife. I never run
Hmm.
jokes past my friends, because
Hmm.
what happens is when you run a joke past someone, it's in isolation. Like it's
Yeah.
just there. And there was no joke before it. There was no joke after it. There was no
Yeah.
body movement before it. There was no spotlight shining on me and music playing before the show, right? So, like, all that plays a factor into how that bit is going to land.
Right. So I think it is definitely a good idea to. I know comics who are fantastic, but they do always want to run a joke by you, right? And to me, I don't necessarily think it's always a bad idea if you really, but it's so tricky to like let's say that you are running a joke by your significant other. That's not it's not going to be unless you have a completely honest relationship with them. That's there's a trust level where they will be able to say, "Oh, I don't like that joke" to your face, and it doesn't bother you at all. Then I guess, okay, that would be an unbiased person. But for me, when I was starting out, I kind of had a couple mentors that were had been doing it a lot longer than me, and they had no skin in the game as far as hurting my feelings if they didn't like a joke that I ran by them. So they'd almost be like begrudgingly admitting, okay, that's pretty good, and then I knew I had something because it's somebody who's been doing it for so many years, and I'm 6 months in, and they're telling me I have something. Then it would help me, like, then I would go and I'd flesh it out and I'd rehearse it a million times and figure out the rhythm of it, whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I know certain comics that they do it to a fault where they're always asking. I know this one comic, and I mean I love him, and I'm not gonna say his name, but he actually keeps a tally. So he'll write a joke and then he'll ask everyone that he knows at the club, and then he'll keep a tally for each person who said they liked it and each person that said they didn't like it. Um, and so I think that I kind of tried to I'm I, I'm trying to convince him to learn to trust himself. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and I think once you get to a certain amount of experience in comedy, you should be able to trust yourself and your voice, whether or not something is funny. But everyone has their own way of figuring it out, and
Yeah.
everyone has their own kind of um. I mean, a lot of comedy comes out of insecurity, and so if you're really, really, really insecure, it's going to be hard to tell, hey, fix your entire life view of yourself. As it's a lot of time, it's not a joke writing issue. It's this person has, I mean, it's more like, hey, you know, start trusting yourself, start believing in yourself, and that's so easy to say and so hard to do for
Mm.
sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been a comedian for 8 years, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you said you had so you spent the last four as a road comic, right?
Yeah, I would say the last five, the first year I was part-time where I had a job and then I would do road stuff. And then after a year of that, I started to get booked to the point where I was coming back to my hometown just to go to work, and then sometimes I'd be, losing out on gigs because I was going back to my hometown instead of staying on the road and going to more shows. Sometimes you're getting booked um in that town. I mean, one time I was in Cleveland for 2 months. I didn't plan on being in Cleveland for 2 months, but it just happened to be that I had these three shows in Ohio, and then from those shows I started to get more shows and more, and then I mean, so then I ended up I started dating a girl in Cleveland. Like like I started getting like roots of being put in Cleveland because I kept getting booked in that area. Um, I was doing the funny stuff a few times, and then, I mean, it was just it got to the point where it was like, okay, I'm learning that I can do this so I can do this for a new town. You know what I mean? It kind of showed me that I can become part of a scene if I just stick around. And I
Mm.
love the Cleveland scene. I have friends in the Cleveland scene, and I'm looking forward to coming back. And then I'm coming back in September. And but it wasn't intentional. You know what I mean? It was
Mm.
I had a couple different bookers that had me in. It was I can't remember the names of these towns around Cleveland, but these really small towns. But then
Mhm.
there's like 300 people in there, in the room, but like it's a population of 700 in the whole town. But uh, so because of, I guess, learning that I could kind of become a part of a scene if I stuck around, it, it made me decide, okay, I need to become a part of, a big scene so I can hopefully make a name for myself, get some credits, get maybe a writing job on a TV show, something like that. So I ended up going to LA for a month, and then I came to New York for a couple of weeks and decided on New York. So, and I'm still here.
And what before we get, I do want to talk about that decision. But
Yeah.
before we dive into that, like, um, can you kind of give me like a breakdown of up until this point, up until making that decision of, "Hey, I'm gonna start um uh becoming like doubling down on a bigger scene and really
hmm
integrating yourself into that comedy community." Before
hmm
you made that decision, what are some lessons that you learned along the way?
Well, I learned that the scene where you start is a lot of the times not going to be the scene that you uh, flourish in, because you're going to be surrounded by people who know the day you started. You know what I mean?
Mm.
They know
Mhm.
exactly when you started, and they know when they started. And
Mhm.
so they're always going to kind of compare themselves to you, and they're going to always kind of treat you like you were when you started. If they've been doing it longer than you, they're always going to treat you like you've been doing it less time. They're always going to kind of, you know uh they're never going to book you to like headline a show that they're on if they've been doing comedy twice as long as you, even
Mhm.
if you're a better comic, because they know you from when you started. And
Mhm.
so it's I'd say it's tough to ever go from, even, I mean, I started in Madison, and I go back, and uh, barely anyone that I started with is doing comedy anymore.
Mhm.
Um, so it's different, I guess. I don't really know. A lot of the comics that are doing it now, because they're all new, and it's a because it's a college town. It's kind of a revolving
Mhm.
scene.
Mhm.
It's not a place that people really stay more than a few years.
Mhm.
But I can see it in other scenes. Like, there's so much inner drama that has to do with people comparing themselves to you, and then there's, girlfriends and boyfriends and all these other dramatic um, things that can happen that can affect your relationship with your peers. Um, oh, these two guys dated the same girl. Now there's this whole thing. You know what I mean? There's like all these different things that can kind of interfere with the liberty that you should have on stage to just be in the moment, making an audience who doesn't know your girlfriend,
Mm,
you know what I mean, laugh. Like
yeah.
so sometimes it's tough to just stay in one place for a long time and not feel um have at least some type of drama with somebody over the years because of something. And so I do think that it's healthy to once you get your sea legs, if you will, to kind of venture and have a fresh start where people aren't judging you based on how long you've been doing it.
Very interesting. What are your thoughts on when you're starting out, bar gigs versus club gigs? Is it a one or the other, or is it both, or is it choose wisely?
Well, in an ideal world, I think most comics we'd love to never have to do a bar show ever. Uh, and it's because it's it's tougher. It's not when you're starting out, you don't have the skills at how to wrangle a a bar's attention. I mean, uh, so I would say that clubs, obviously, everyone would love to just have to just do clubs. And so in a club, it's a captive audience. You have an audience who are either they've probably paid. I mean, maybe they got in for free, but
Mm-hmm.
they at least know where they know they're at a comedy club. You know,
Yeah.
they know that it's a comedy show.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good place to craft your material and learn your rhythm and all that stuff. But uh, that's not the way that I would say that 90% of comedy shows are not at clubs. They're at bowling alleys and picnics and uh, anything you can think of. Any place that you can, any bar, any place that you can think of is where 90% of comedy shows happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so uh, I think it's really important to do these uh, more difficult uh, bar shows. Like, I'm talking. I did a show where we were opening the comedy show was actually opening for a DJ that was doing a dance party, and everyone was there for the dance party, and so we had to sneak an hour and a half stand up show to start off the dance party, which everyone is basically sitting there like, God, we wish we could just dance instead, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going up in front of not only a crowd that's, I would say going up in front of a hostile audience and getting them to like you is just going to make you that much better. I mean,
Mm.
an audience that doesn't even, an audience that, I mean, there's so many different types of hostile audiences. And I use that word, but I mean that word. When I say hostile, I mean, they just wish that you weren't doing stand up right now. They either
Yeah.
wish that they wish that they could go home because the show's been going on too long. They wish that you could just let them watch the NFL playoffs that are
Mm-hmm.
happening. You know, it's like there's so many different types of these hostile crowds that they just wish you'd shut up. But you're getting paid, so you literally have to do your job to get the check. Um, so when you learn to make these people, I mean, sometimes they're not even facing you. You get a whole table to turn around and face you and then laugh. I mean, it's gonna give you so much confidence the next time that you do a club show.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh wow, I don't even have to convince you people that stand-up comedy is a worthwhile entertainment
Mm.
choice. Like I get to just be funny and you guys are gonna listen. Like so it's a good way to get your confidence, your muscle, and there's so many tricks that you learn from these type of really crowds of people just talking. I mean, I've seen comics. I mean, I'm sure you've seen where they'll just do their jokes into an just a void of people talking to each other. Like everyone is all having conversations, and the comic is just doing their material at basically at a mass of people that are not paying attention. Um, and I mean, I have never seen that work. You always have to kind of address the fact that nobody. that everyone's talking. You have to
Mm,
get them to stop talking. And if you're gonna tell jokes, so I see that as when people try to treat a bar show like a club show, that's kind of what they're doing. They're like,
mm,
these people are all talking to each other, but I'm gonna just perform like I'm in a club, and it'll magically they'll stop, and it's just you they you learn how to get people to stop talking. I
mm.
have a few tricks. I'm not I'm not gonna give them away right now, but
Of course,
we have
yeah.
our. We, I mean, it's but there are tricks that you learn on how to get an entire group of people to at least give you 5 seconds of silence, of a
Mm,
chance. 'Cause you just all you need is a chance, and you can make everyone laugh, and in that little moment, sometimes you can get them to. I mean, sometimes they'll go back into talking after a little while, but if you can just do it enough times, you can get attention, and you can actually do stand up. But you only learn that from doing the hell gigs, they call them,
mm.
the bar of some bar shows.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a very interesting take. What are your you had mentioned that back in Madison, it's kind of like a revolving scene where people are there for school or what have you, and they're in and out.
Yeah.
Um, do you, I mean, just from my observations, about a year and a half into it, just looking from afar, it seems, and I, I have my own opinions as why this is the case, but it seems like there is a lot of turnover of people trying to start comedy. They do stand
Hmm.
up for 3, 6, 9 months, and then they kind of fall back, and
Yeah.
they quit. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you see?
Yeah. Oh, all the time. They say there's about 10,000 comedians in New York at any given moment, and that always sounds crazy to me. But when you go to some of these mics, and it's like, okay, there's like 200 mics this week, and you go to one and there's 50 people, all of which who have not been doing stand up for more than 6 months, and you realize, oh, okay. There's 9,000 comics right now that have just been doing it for a few months or less than a year. And if they didn't go away, we probably have a million comedians after, by now in New
Yeah,
York,
yeah,
all fighting for stage time. So
yeah.
it's not for everyone. I mean, it's just and usually people figure it out within the first year. Sometimes they don't figure it out for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, and oof, that can be I say it's the healthiest to figure out sooner than later.
Mm,
Um, and it's good to keep honest people around you that are, uh, yeah, I think that sometimes people they have too much support.
mm,
They have too many times all their coworkers are going to their shows, too many times that their friends and are packing the crowd. I mean, a lot of people, they can be very funny, with their friends and family, so much charisma, all that stuff, but it just doesn't translate to strangers in front of a crowd. And so, um, I feel like that sometimes that's a very common thing that happens is your first year, it's new to your friends and family still. So they'll come out to see you,
mm,
they want to support you, your dream. They want to support you. After about a year or so, your friends and family are like, we've come out already to your stuff. Like, uh, my family, the only reason that they want to see me do it now is because I'm only in town once every 6 months. So, it's half. They just want to see me, period, because they don't get to see
mm,
me at all.
mm,
It's not necessarily even about me doing stand up. They just, so, but uh, if you're, I think if you have too much support, sometimes it can give you this false sense of confidence, where you don't know how someone who didn't grow up with you is taking these jokes,
mm. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. That's huge. What was the thing that stuck out to you when you were starting out that led you to believe that you should continue and keep working?
Well, I would say after the first time I did stand up, having this, because I mean, I had one friend that was with me, and it was, 200 people that didn't know me, and the fact that one of my jokes landed to the point where they all laughed and then kind of cheered. Um, I mean, to be honest, that's kind of the moment where I'm like, this, and then the other comics that had been doing it longer than me after that set were all telling me uh, how uncommon that is
Mm,
for a first timer to get that type of reaction on a joke they wrote. It wasn't because I was saying it's my first time, oh, cheering. No, it was based on
mm,
just a setup, punchline, joke, cheer. So I was getting a lot of the other comics telling me, oh, you're already this funny and it's your first time. And they were kind of like expressing more kind of frustration or and that was a very common I would say I got a lot of negative vibes from certain comics who had been doing it for years when I started. They would tell me they hated me, they hated my face, they hated, uh, you know, I mean, they'd straight up tell me they hated me. And to be honest with you, that was also kind of, I mean, in the moment, it was like, I'm like, why are they being so mean? This is kind of, I just want to, I'm just trying to get along with the scene. It would be nice to be liked by, the people who are kind of veterans. Oh, all those people who told me that they hated my guts, none of them do stand up anymore. But the fact that I was getting those type of reactions from some of the comics, and then uh, you know, uh, the comics that weren't that, kind of bitter, I guess, about it, they would just tell me like, hey, you know, like you actually have good jokes, you're a good writer, and so I would just say that unsolicited feedback from people who don't have any skin in the game on hurting your feelings
mm.
is something that gives you a lot of encouragement. Okay, now I should also mention that when I did start, I know I'm talking a lot, but this is kind of interesting to me to tell you because I did have kind of a unique source from feedback. When I started comedy, I was actually pretty active in the Joe Rogan Experience forum. He had a forum on his website. I don't know
Mhm.
if you've ever
Yeah.
uh, heard of. So he had this forum on his website where people would talk about anything, uh, but then every once in a while people would post their stand-up clip in the forum, just in the general forum, and being like, hey, let me know what you think. And a lot of the time, it was like pages and pages of people just roasting that person because it wasn't very good. Um, and I mean, it's gonna sound like I'm trying to brag or whatever, but when I did my first clip, my first stand up, I posted it in that forum because um I just wanted attention. I wanted people that I also was really interested in what people thought. And you get some, I had some people be like, I wish I would have rather watched my mother slowly die from cancer than that clip. It was one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite comments. Um, but the fact that I got so many people that this is I mean, it's a brutally honest forum, but I had enough people that told me that I had, they like this joke or they like this joke or they like this and that, and then a lot of constructive feedback too, a lot of constructive criticism. I mean, I think I had my jokes written on my hand or something, like obviously, like put the time in, rehearse, practice, all that stuff, do it a million times. And a lot of those people that are telling me that stuff were other comics. Maybe they were acting anonymously, but there was even some club manager that was in there. I remember one time he's like, I book Acme in Minneapolis, and here's my critique. And just getting this unbiased feedback from strangers and even comics who have been doing it longer and even club managers telling me that I had something uh, was I think I haven't thought of quitting since I mean you think of quitting every time you have a bad show a
Mm.
little bit but not seriously. It's kind of like you just have the feel of like oh God, like what am I getting myself into? But you know that happens more often the first few years and less often, you know, after after many years. But you know you still always have that little fleeting feeling. But
Mm.
early on, when I really needed the confidence to keep going, it was the people, the strangers that would tell me that I had something going. So cause I knew, I mean, my family didn't watch my stand up for the first few years. You know, my dad, now he goes to every show that he can. I mean, when I'm around, I mean, but when I was starting out, the last thing he wanted to see was his son embarrass himself, you know?
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. Wow, that's a great story with the Rogan Forum. And
Right, yeah. You think it's a place where a lot of people say, "Oh, what a bunch of jerks in there." And it's like, yeah, there are a bunch of there are a bunch of jerks in there, and that's good.
yeah.
Because if you have a bunch of jerks saying, "All right, I don't I don't necessarily I'm not enjoying telling you, but yeah, you're pretty funny, I guess." Like the fact that
Yeah.
even people who would love to shit on you, who came into the forum, they'll even say, "I came to roast you, but then it wasn't that bad." And it's like
Yeah.
those are the compliments that you really need to hold on, because those are those are truth. That's truth, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I know we're getting close to an hour here. I want to be respectful of your time, but um the last thing I want to
No,
touch
no.
the last thing I want to touch on is, this next chapter. You said you spent some time in LA. Now you're in New York. What made you choose New York?
Well, I kind of always thought of I always kind of thought it would be New York for me. Um, But when I decided that I was going to move permanently to a big city, I guess I went to LA just in case, just to see if maybe something pop off real quick in a month's time, which it didn't. But I kind of went just in case to see if I got a strike of luck, the right person saw me, and then maybe it would have led to something. Um, but I knew that New York would be more where I would be more comfortable, as far as being around people who are focused on stand up. It's more competitive here as far as how good the comics are. In LA, there's a whole bunch of other things you can do. I mean, in New York too now, but like, I mean, there's so much sketch, there's so much improv, there's so much acting,
Mm,
modeling. I mean, I'm not a model, but for some comics, they're models, and then they're just doing whatever um, to get famous.
mm,
And in New York, it's not so focused on your image, your brand. It's like, are you funny? Are you not funny? And that's I think it's for me it was a more healthy place for me to be to get to that next level of being a stand-up comic. So I wouldn't. Um, so that's kind of why I chose New York, and it's everything's more concentrated as far as um, LA's a little more spread out, but it's not just New York too. The thing is, like, the whole East Coast has all these places within, a couple hours drive, and I have my car on top of it, so